First, just tell me how you guys are doing today. It's been 1 week since all of this happened. How are you doing?
Sir, I'm doing pretty well as far as the circumstances that have been provided. Just taking it one day at a time. The Marines we're keeping ourselves busy, playing sports, doing PMEs and stuff, trying to keep all the Marines' minds off of the situation and trying to get back to the way we used to be.
Sergeant Cantu, I understand you're already back to work and you're trying to move forward with the job at hand?
Exactly. We're ready to get, we're eager to get back to work. We're happy to be working again. And like I said, the Marines are tough and we're ready to keep pushing. When
you say back to work, I realize that you guys can't go to where you've been working because it's still an active crime scene. Where are you meeting, or tell me about what your work is at this point?
At this point in time, sir, we're not allowed to discuss on where we are.
I understand.
But as far as everything, we're just trying to brainstorm, get everything back together, get all our network and comm and all that stuff up to par, and get back into it.
I want to know about these 5 service members who lost their lives, and I understand at least 3 of them you all knew pretty well, very well. Let's just start talking about those gentlemen first. Gunny Sullivan. What can you tell me about Gunny Sullivan?
Gunny Sullivan was a stand-up Marine, one of the best gunnery sergeants I've ever served with. I've been in the Marine Corps 11 years. Stand-up guy, always thanking me for administrative tasks and everything, thanking other Marines for the stuff they do, always asking if he can do anything for you or anybody else that we worked with. Just a phenomenal guy.
And your memories of Gunny Sullivan and kind of the person that he was and what he meant to you is also, I know when you work under someone in the Marines, you look up to those senior NCOs and you take your orders from that, and that's who you kind of pattern yourself after a lot of times as well. Can you speak to that?
You could tell he really cared about the Marines.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to work long hours if I'm not told not to, basically, and he would always come back and make a point to come back and say, you need to go home, like it's time to go home, like you have a home. And he was just always there for me personally, it kept me from going too much too fast and it's just too hard. He was really worried about me getting burnt out, and that's something that I needed to learn, and I'm taking with me and keeping with me to make sure that I better take care of my junior Marines.
Yeah, PFC Noyes, I know that you haven't been there very long, but you also worked with Gunny Sullivan. Just tell us about Gunny Sullivan.
Gunny is probably one of the more active guys in the I&I stuff that I've actually gotten to work with. I checked him into the unit and gave him his gear and all that, and he was like a father figure to me. He'd always come back at least 5 times a day, coming back to check how I was doing. Had so many different nicknames for me. He's probably the hardest one for me to lose out of all of them. Didn't even realize it until Captain said, who's not here. And yeah, he was all around a great Marine. Everything I want to be in a Marine.
You talk about hardest to lose. That's something I understand. Being in the Marine Corps, this is a possibility. You go to combat, these things happen. Clearly, no one ever expected this to happen here in Chattanooga last week. Just your thoughts on the fact that we lost 5 service members, 4 Marines who came to work every day, did their job, and were outstanding Marines as far as everything we've ever heard. Just get your thoughts on that. Just losing these men and how that's hit you.
As you know, I was close to a lot of them. I was even close to LS2 Smith, the sailor we lost. It's taken a huge burden on myself as far as the loss of men. I've been in this situation before, not exactly of what happened, but I've been on CACO teams and everything else as far as notifying families, and I've done funerals in the Chattanooga area, Chattanooga National, and this is definitely something that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
The Marines they're Marines, and we're going to be Marines. And we've lost Marines before, and I'm proud that I've been able to work with them, and I'm proud that I've been able to know them. And like you said, the things that I've learned from those Marines and the sailor, and just who they were and their work ethic is something that I'm going to keep with me and I'm going to grow with me, and I was lucky to be able to work with them.
Tell me about Staff Sergeant Wyatt.
Staff Sergeant Wyatt was one of my close friends. He's a very kind man, did a lot for his family. We always found myself going into his office talking to him about stuff. And we loved beer together. We always talked about beer. We always went into Captain Cotton's office and we were all talking about microbrews and everything else. And he was a stand-up guy. He was part of the Hickson family, and I know his son was an active Boy Scout and everything, and just a true gentleman, father, great Marine.
Your thoughts on Staff Sergeant Wyatt?
He was one that I went to for information. He always seemed to know what was going on. I mean, just the most minute things. I'd be like, where is this, or whatever happened to this? Like, oh, that's back over here. Like, he always knew, like, he knew the unit and he knew everything. So he's who I went to for just day-to-day stuff I didn't know the answer to.
When you're in the Marine Corps, it's not just a job that you do. You're not just going to work every day. It's not just your career. These people are part of your family. I mean, you're around them long hours, and for many times, days on end. Can you speak to that? This is not like losing a coworker. This is something that's a lot different than that, a lot deeper than that.
Yes, sir, and that's what separates the Marine Corps from the civilian sector of life. We are brothers, we are sisters, and we band together when things get tough and we get through it. I was in the civilian job before I came in the Marine Corps and everything, and you just don't have that bond and everything outside of the Marine Corps. I mean, it's a different life, and when you're on base and you're with these Marines all the time, they are your family, because you don't have your family near you. I just came from Hawaii, and all the Marines on Marine Corps Base Hawaii were our family, and we do stuff together. We go out and have fun. We go hiking. We, come over and have cookouts, and they are your family.
You didn't know Staff Sergeant Wyatt very well, did you?
He was actually back in the supply house quite often before Sergeant had checked in.
Yeah.
With Staff Sergeant Clemens, the supply chief, prior to Sergeant Cantu. He was one of Staff Sergeant Clemens' best friend, and the respect I had for Staff Sergeant kind of came over to him too. He was always looking out for us, always was willing to come back there, poke jokes at us being on our phones a little bit too much occasionally. But he always lightened up the atmosphere when things were starting to get boring and make sure we had stuff to do.
Sergeant Holmquist, what can you tell us about him?
Sergeant Holmquist was a family man. He loved his son, he loved his wife, he loved hunting. They came over to the house several times. And he was a great man. Hard worker. Always wanted me to take him fishing, and of course never got around to it, but great man.
Speak to this. The three NCOs, Gunny Sullivan, Staff Sergeant Wyatt, and Sergeant Holmquist, they were active duty Marines, so they were there every day. I know this is a reserve unit in large part, but these men were there every day as well as you two. These are people you saw every day, and that, like we talked about earlier, part of a bigger family. So when people hear Reserve Center, this is not just someone that you saw 2 days out of the month. You saw them every day practically.
Yes, sir. And sometimes on weekends, and sometimes all day. I mean, sun up, sundown. It just depends on what's going on. You get really close with your unit. You get really close when you're in a small staff like we have. You get really close to people. And like I said, I just got here, but I was really excited about working with these guys. I mean, they had a really good work ethic, and they had really intelligent, and it was going to be a good team, and they were really excited about working with them. And just good people all around.
Lance Corporal Wells,
He was a reservist, correct?
yes, sir.
Tell us about him.
I didn't know Lance Corporal Wells too well. I knew him in passing, as I am the administrative chief. He had asked me about pay and stuff that reservists always ask about.
Sure.
And I talked to him a couple of days before the incident, and we just sat down and he was asking me about some stuff, and I answered his questions, and went to his memorial on the other day. And
Down in Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Amazing support from the community. They couldn't have done a better job. It was amazing, the support and the love that young man had.
Either one of you want to talk about Lance Corporal Wells at all? Did either one of you know him very well?
I had really just kind of met him that day, actually.
Met him that day?
Yeah, well, I had seen him in passing before, but that day he was, since the gun Marines, the ones that are on ADOS, they just go to the different sections and help out. Wells, he came back to supply, and we were just joking, talking all day. Me and him, I work full NCOs and staff NCOs, so having another junior Marine finally felt like an actual working party. And he was always great. He always had a smile on his face, willing to laugh and joke, and he fit right into supply. I mean, except for the fact he couldn't count, but he's a great guy.
You mentioned that day, and I want to get to that in a moment, but first let's talk about Petty Officer Smith as well. It's a Navy and Marine facility. Can you tell us kind of how that works as far as what your jobs are in relation to the Navy people who were there, and kind of about him as a person as well?
The NOSC is the Navy Operational Support Center, and we just piggyback off of them as Marine Corps Reserve. They are there as administrative support to their naval sailors out in the area. I guess I'm not sure exactly what they do. I know they do a lot of administration for the sailors and everything in the area. They have reservists just like we do that come in and drill. So they're more of an admin support team than more to the artillery side. But as far as Smith, he was a good friend as well. We'd always talk about fishing and everything. He talked about taking his daughter fishing and everything, and we were just talking about fishing that morning, about him going out to Chickamauga Creek and Fort Oglethorpe and fishing and everything, and we were talking about all the fish he caught and stuff. So he was a great man as well. Always had a smile on his face, always came over to us and talked to us, and I can't say enough about him. He's just great.
Okay, let's move to the day. Last Thursday. What can you tell me about that day? Before the incident, and then what happened during the incident?
Before the incident, it was any other normal day. Come to work, go to PT, get changed over. That day, the Marines that were actually going through the inventory, the CMR and everything, they didn't PT. They went straight to work, and it was just like a normal day. You know, like I went over and talked to LS2 Smith, talked to him for a little bit about fishing and everything, just like I normally do, go to the Navy side and get some chit-chat going with those guys, and just say good morning to everybody. And then chaos broke loose.
That morning was, we were doing an inventory which was slated for 3 days, and we were slightly ahead of schedule by about a day and a half. We were ahead of schedule because the Marines had been working so well together as a team, and that's something that one thing Gunnery Sgt Sullivan would say every day. Like, I appreciate how hard you guys have been working and how much of a team we've come together. We had, like Noyes said, we have guns platoon Marines helping in the supply warehouse, and we have just Marines helping each other out. So that morning we were pretty much completed with everything, a day and a half ahead of schedule, because that's just the teamwork that we had and the leadership that we had. And so there's a little bit of an air of excitement. You know, we were happy to have it over with. We've been stressing over it for about a week, and it was something we really wanted to get done. And we were working on just the administrative stuff. And you know, everyone was pretty much almost packing our bags, ready to just, you know, say, hey, we're good. At least as far as the inventory went and all the stress that went with it. Yeah, that morning was one of the better mornings, I think.
Staff Sergeant, you said the word chaos. Tell me about chaos. Tell me what happened. Tell me when you first realized there was something going on.
I first realized everything when my sergeant came into my office. She came in and said that there was a shooter, and once I was in there actually before anything happened, I was talking with one of the reserve corpsmen, Doc Aliano, and him and I were talking about stuff and everything. And then she came in the office upset, said there was a shooter. We closed the door. I immediately got on the phone with 911, and Doc Aliano put his back up against the door to keep it closed and put his hand on my desk and his right hand on the wall to kind of put a brace there. Myself and Sergeant Vincent were under the desk on the phone with 911. And I was on the phone with 911 trying to tell her, the dispatch, where I was hearing the shots being fired to try to give them a general idea of where the shooter was on the premises. She talked me through everything, constantly let me know that Chattanooga Police Department was on the scene and taking care of the situation.
So you were on the phone with dispatcher, 911 operator the entire time?
Yes, sir.
And you were in your office the entire time?
Yes, sir.
So from the time the first shots were fired to the end, you were in your office?
Yes, sir.
You had no alert before any shots were fired that something may be going on? Because as you well know at this point, there was a first location to the second location. Didn't know anything was happening until there were shots fired?
No, sir. When I was on the phone with 911, she asked me if we were on Lee Highway, and I said no, and I was trying to tell her where we were exactly, and she finally figured it out that we were in the river park, and the cops were already there on scene and everything. And once I heard the gunshots back in the distance, I got up and told Doc Aliano, get away from the door, and then he wanted to go out and aid the Marines or whoever was shot, because we didn't know at that time anything was going on. And I told him to stay in the office, don't go anywhere. And we moved my desk in front of the door, and we all got beside my desk behind the concrete wall. And then once everything kind of calmed down, Chattanooga Police Department came in and got us out and took us to safety.
Tell me about your emotions and your thoughts at that time. What were you feeling? What were you thinking?
I was very calm on the phone with 911. I was trying to relay as much information as I could to her to take care of the situation and get my Marine and Doc Aliano and myself out to safety as quickly as possible. My emotions, I don't think I had any.
Were you aware at that point that anybody had been actually shot or anybody had been killed at that point? Did you know anything about that?
No, sir.
You just knew that shots were being fired and you were taking cover?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant, tell us about what your experience was. First of all, how far away from his office were you at that time? Were you inside?
I was one office away from him.
Gotcha.
Like I said, we were wrapping up the inventory, so we're working more on the administrative side, and we were kind of gathered around one office, and I heard a loud noise, kind of indistinguishable at first.
So you didn't know what that noise was?
I didn't know what it was. I honestly initially thought that, the Marines back in the warehouse had broke something, because that's what Marines do. And then I started hearing the impacts on the wall in the main office, and the rate of fire had increased. And once I heard one or two what we call double taps, like multiple rounds at once. Mm-hmm. Then that's when I knew it was definitely gunfire, and it was definitely coming in our direction, or it was coming in the building. Immediately we turned and we start pushing out of the back. Now our building's kind of confusing, and there's a couple doorways here and there, but obviously we know it very well. But so as we turned and went out the back, we're pushing Marines as we go. Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan was pushing the Marines out, and he's yelling, get out, get out, get out. And instead of taking that first door that's available, like we pushed back out the back of the warehouse where the majority of the Marines were. How many Marines did you have with you in the warehouse at the time?
We have 4 or 5, and then anyone in the motor pool wouldn't have.
Yeah, and so we pushed back out that way, and Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan was very adamant about getting the Marines out and pushing them out. And
So Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan was with you at the time when you first heard shots fired?
yes, he was.
Was Staff Sergeant Wyatt with you at that time?
Yes, he was.
What about Sergeant Holmquist or Lance Corporal Wells?
No, they weren't.
They were not with you at the time. So you're in a room, you're in an office, like you said, several Marines with you, and you're going to the back of the warehouse, running to safety, I assume?
Running to get the Marines out first.
Gotcha.
Getting the Marines to safety was number one. And then yes, we were once we pushed the Marines out of the back of the warehouse, safety was the big thing.
Where'd you go from there? What happened next?
From there, we were in a location, and the Marines started to climb over the fence. We knew who was with us and who wasn't with us at the time. Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan was able to quickly figure out who was and wasn't with us. And he determined that at some point we had to move locations, and it was the best choice for us, for our safety, and we did. And the Marines reacted fantastically, and they moved locations where they were supposed to go. And it was so the ones who hadn't been able to climb the fence yet, they were able to do it at that point. So the ones that were able to climb over the fence, once they were able to do it, and I climbed over the fence. You know, Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan was over there. He was with me, and once I got over the fence, it was he wasn't there waiting by the fence anymore. I can't speak for him. I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm fairly certain that he had no intentions of climbing that fence. That he knew there were other Marines and he was going back to get them.
Did you realize that at the time? Was that your first thought?
I would say almost immediately that's what I was thinking. It was like, where did he go? Why? And that's exactly what I thought. There must be something there.
What about Staff Sergeant Wyatt? Was he there with you as well?
Whenever we moved locations, I honestly can't tell you where they went. I can't say if they were with me or were not with me.
When you got over the fence, you realized Gunny Sullivan was not there anymore. Did you try to find him? Would you try to help the other Marines? What was your next thought?
What I thought when he went back, or when I looked back and he was gone, I thought that, and like again, I don't know what he thought, but I think he went back for a reason. I think he went back for the Marines. We still had other Marines that were out, and my focus was shifted to them and trying to get accountability and getting the Marines back. And they did a fantastic job as they pushed back from the actual site. They were collecting up civilians. At one point, he even picked up a child. And they were warning the civilians and pushing them back, and we were able to get them into a safe place and kind of, just fantastic Marine Corps stuff. Young Marines, he's only been here a year, a private first class in the Marine Corps, able to go out there, take fire, and then pick up a baby and go get them to safety with no NCO leadership at the time or staff NCO leadership at the time.
So when you got over the fence, your thought is to make sure everybody that you see is getting to safety.
Yes.
And you saw civilians. You're on the Riverwalk at this point. Is that where you are?
Yes.
And you're picking up people and trying to get them out of the way as well. At what point did you realize that Gunny Sullivan wasn't coming over that fence?
Immediately.
So you knew when he ran back that.
Yeah. Once I got over the fence and saw he wasn't there, I knew that he had no intentions of coming over that fence without. He had a plan. I can only say what I think, and I think he wanted to get the Marines over that fence, and he wanted to get those Marines to safety, and then he was going to go back for the other Marines.
When you got over the fence, at what point did you realize that there were several people who weren't with you anymore, and that that they weren't?
It wasn't until we got to there's a little maintenance building outside, and that's where we kind of used to establish a secure location. Mm-hmm. We quickly got accountability, and the Marines were split up in three different sites. So the only thing I could speak of is who we had with us, and at that point, your job turns into just reporting that up. And I got in contact with First Armed Rush, and I told them exactly who we had, and then of course you ask, where's so and so, where is everybody at, and they can only count for who they have, and we couldn't speculate at the time, and we couldn't say, maybe they're here, maybe they're there. All we could say is that I have these people, these are who I have, and this is where we're at, and then the rest of it's up for someone else. I can't just be calling and asking and bothering people. The Marines have work to do, and we have our part. We did our part. He had his part. There are multiple locations with multiple people doing multiple things.
PFC Noyes, Sergeant here's talked about what you did when you got over the fence. So tell us what you call, what your account was, what you saw, what happened there. Explain that if you could.
I mean, myself, multiple of the NCOs, and Corporal Wells, we were all just back in the warehouse doing our job. And then next thing I know, we have a Navy guy coming in back there, and he's telling us that we got an active shooter, we got to get out. And we didn't even believe him at first until we realized, no, this might be serious. He's not joking. We got out, and last I know of Lance Corporal Wells, he was sprinting to the motor pool. He knew there was Marines back there, and he knew that their lives were matter.
So he was with you when this started, or when you knew something was going on?
Yes, sir.
And he ran to the motor pool? He
ran to the motor pool. We had multiple Marines back there working as well, and we figured if we can't hear in the supply warehouse, there's no way they heard in the motor pool. He went back there. He went and got them out, and I've had multiple of them tell me that if it wasn't for him, they might not be with us either. But after that, we all just went to the rally point, and from that point, that's when Gunny told us to jump the fence. And being the junior Marine, I just took the order and ran with it. And then myself and multiple of the other Marines, we were just running through the river park, getting the civilians out, grabbing the children. We just knew what we had to do as Marines, that we're here to protect the civilians as well. So, and then we went to the 8-inch check, and then started basically hit all the points there.
Were you looking for Lance Corporal Wells when he ran away from you to meet back at the point? What were you thinking about him at that point?
I had never realized where he was, that he had left us until we got to the rally point. And that's when I realized, oh crap, he's not with us. He was one of the top concerns within our little campus. Where's Wells? Where's Wells?
So you were with the sergeant here when Gunny Sullivan told everybody to get over the fence?
Yes.
Did you look back just like the sergeant did and see he wasn't there anymore? Where were you in all of that? What did you see?
As soon as Gunny told me to jump the fence, the amount of respect I had for him, I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to protect his Marines, and I wasn't going to question. He's done enough that he had to earn my respect. So I just took the order and ran with it, did what I knew, what I needed to do as a Marine.
You got on the ground, like the sergeant described. You saw civilians out there that were too close to the scene.
Yes.
Who'd you see? What'd you do?
We first initially ran through there was multiple people coming over the bike path, and we were just immediately telling them, turn around, get back. You don't need to go in here. Next thing I know, we have a playground right next to the reserve center, so I see a family just playing, and my mind immediately flashed to my brother. He's only 7, and my mom was saying, I can't imagine what would be happening to me right now if he had been there. If they had been in Knoxville instead of Chattanooga. So I just grabbed the kid and ran, just getting him as far away from the situation as possible, telling other civilians, you got to get out of here. It's not safe. And then we secured him to what we believed was a safe location.
When you hear those stories and you know that this happened, I mean, obviously we know the 5 people who lost their lives, heroes, no doubt. But there was more heroic action than just those 5 men. Can you explain that you really had a lot of people protecting each other that day? Can you talk about that?
Yes, sir. You really don't get the full aspect of what happened until after a certain situation happens. And that's when you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Marines are Marines, and we're going to try to do whatever we can to protect ourselves, whether it's here or whether it's in theater, whether it's wherever it might be in the world. We're always going to be there. Like we said, we stated, we're family, and we're always going to be family, and we're going to protect each other as such.
When you got cleared that night and they let you go home, what's that been like the last few days? I mean, have you been able to what's it been like the last few days? Just tell me how you doing mentally.
Mentally, train wreck. Take them one day at a time, talking to people. The day after, or the day that it did happen, when we were released, my wife came and picked me up, and all we did was just hug and cry. And then I went home, and I couldn't stay at home. I had to leave.